All right, folks, we often talk about the national elections on this show, but we have made it perfectly clear local elections, frankly, matter more so than the national elections. You recently had the mayoral race in Birmingham. You also, of course, had a sister who was reelected in San Antonio for mayor. Huge, huge election in Atlanta next month to replace the term-limited Mayor Kasim Reed. So we're going to break down, so there are 12 people who are running for mayor. And so we're going to go through the candidates, not in any particular order. Just let's start with the first up. So it's the first candidate, Peter Amon, of course. He is a Democrat, former director partner at Bain and Company. He used to work with Mayor Shirley Franklin. He also is the chief operating officer for Mayor Kasim Reed. Polling shows he's about 7% in this race. The next candidate, please, is Rohit Amanamanchi. I think I got that right. 24 years old, transportation engineer. He wants to use 21st century technology to revolutionize the city. He is polling at 0%. Next candidate, please. We have Keisha Lance Bottoms. She's a member of the Atlanta City Council, former executive director of the Atlanta Fulton County Recreation Authority. She's polling at 15%, and she has not gotten a formal endorsement from Mayor Kasim Reed, but he did tweet out a fundraiser. That says a whole lot right there, saying it without saying, I see you, Mayor Reed. John Eves, he's the chair of the Fulton County Commission. He is polling at 2% there, according to a WXIA TV poll. Next candidate, Vincent Fort, minority whip of the Georgia State Senate. He recently was endorsed by former Governor Roy Barnes. He is polling at 7%. Also, Bernie Sanders also endorsed him. Kawanza Hall, Atlanta Public School Board member, also served on Atlanta City Council. He is polling at 7%. Next candidate, please, LaBon King. He, of course, started United Economic Development Council for minority-owned businesses. He's polling at 1%. You have the next candidate, Cesar Mitchell, Atlanta City Council president since 2010. He's been endorsed by Ambassador, former Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young, also Reverend C.T. Vivian. He's polling at 10%. Mary Norwood, of course, Atlanta City Councilwoman. She barely lost to Kasim Reed 4 years ago. She has been endorsed by the Atlanta's main police and fire unions. She's polling at 28%. The top getter in the poll. Michael Sterling, former executive director of Atlanta Workforce Agency, former senior advisor to Mayor Kasim Reed, former federal prosecutor in Chicago, polling at 1%. Also, Kathy Woolard, first woman president of the Atlanta City Council. She has been endorsed by the Human Rights Campaign and Georgia Equality. She's polling at 7%. Also, Glenn Wrightson, 2013 mayoral candidate. He self-funded his campaign for $1 million. It is not money well spent. He's polling at 0%. Let's go to someone who is covering so many issues in Atlanta. Of course, Ernie Subzi, the race and culture reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and most importantly, a member of the greatest fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. You like that, Greg Carr? Absolutely. All right. So, Ernie, so let's break this thing down. You have Norwood, who is polling more than anybody else at 28%. That's a huge number. Bottoms is at 15%. And so explain what's going on here in terms of this support.
What you basically have is two mayoral races, the way I like to look at it. You have Mary Norwood, who's definitely going to be in the runoff. So the race now is for second place. Is that going to be Keisha Bottoms? Is that going to be Cesar Mitchell, Peter Heyman? So the race now is for second place. Mary Norwood is clearly at about 25 to 28% constantly polling. She's going to be in the runoff. So now the question now is who's going to come in second. Now you have kind of the jockeying. You have Kasim Reed kind of getting involved in the race a lot now. So the race now is for number two. And the overriding issue at this, as your viewers have seen, that Mary Norwood is leading the race. She's been leading all along. And Atlanta has not had a white mayor since 1973, since Maynard Jackson ascended to office.
Is that shaking folks up there? Or I was just in Atlanta last week. I'll be back in Atlanta on Sunday for a few days and then the following week as well. And in talking to folks there, what I've constantly heard is, well, a lot of people expect that African Americans will turn out in big numbers for a black candidate in the runoff. You buying that?
hope. I mean, I think that what you mentioned, you have 12 candidates. Probably 8 or 9 of those are serious candidates. And what people are hoping for behind the scenes is that somebody's going to drop out and coalesce behind 1 or 2 main black candidates. Because there's also a possibility that Peter Amon or Kathy Willard can get into the runoff, and they're both white candidates. So people want these black candidates to coalesce. One of the things that you did not mention in some of your polling data is that Mary Norwood, Peter Amon, and Kathy Willard, the 3 white candidates, all polled double figures in white voters, whereas Keisha Lance Bottoms and Caesar Mitchell polled double figures in black voters. So there is this kind of racial split that's kind of going on. Atlanta is not that chocolate city Mecca that we grew up with and kind of loved. It's changing. There's a lot of demographics, a lot of more affluent people are coming in, a lot of millennials are coming in. You got $30,000 houses that were selling 10 years ago going for $300,000 now. So people are kind of getting priced out of Atlanta. So the look and feel of Atlanta is changing, and that could be a factor in this November's election.
So what is the breakdown in terms of registered voters? And so what's the percentage of black voters in Atlanta, the percentage of white voters, Hispanic voters?
Down. I mean, the percentage of black voters in Atlanta is probably down to about 51%. Maynard Jackson, when Maynard Jackson was elected, I believe, and you can read my story to get the exact numbers, I believe that the figure was 69%. So that number has steadily gone down over the last few years. In 2009, for example, Kasim Reed beat Mary Norwood in a runoff by 714 votes, which is pretty much unprecedented over the last 32 years prior to that. So the numbers are kind of evening up a little bit. So you're going to kind of see that kind of racial split. There's also a political party split. You know, Mary Norwood, who's leading in the race, leading in the polls, identifies as an independent, but she is going to be campaigned against as a Republican. There was a earlier this week in which all of the candidates were asked their opinions of Donald Trump. She unequivocally did not want to mention his name or say anything critical about him. Now, you don't have to say anything critical about the president if you're asked, but she clearly did not say that consciously.
Right. Spencer.
Turnout is essential, right? In 2013, turnout was only 15%, about 15% in terms of registered voters actually turned out. So if, 45% of the voters are white and, about 50% are black, it really doesn't matter if turnout is as low as 15%. It just really matters who's going to the polls.
So basically, Ernie, if you have 40-50% turnout this time, does that benefit Mary Norwood versus the black candidates?
But you got to look at 2013. Kasim Reed was basically running unopposed. He got like 89-90% of the vote. You got to kind of look at 2009, which saw more people vote in the runoff, which is unprecedented, than they voted in the general election. So I think that the voter turnout will be bigger.
So what was the turnout number in the runoff? So 14% was the general election?
That would no. He mentioned 2013. 2013, Kasim Reed basically ran. 2009 is when he ran against Mary Norwood. I don't have those.
Got it. Rena, real quick.
Look, this crowded field is something else. I really do wish more candidates would drop out and coalesce one behind the other. But I certainly hope that, Atlanta's leadership is going to be reflective of the state. And the state is changing. When people are getting priced out, I mean, the truth is there are only a certain number of people who can live downtown. And unfortunately, that may work in Norwood's favor. And
of course, what we also see, Greg, when you look at what's happening there, you've seen the exact same thing happen here in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
You're seeing it in New Orleans. You're seeing it. You see it in Detroit. All places except D.C., where you have had white mayors, in places where you've had successive black mayors.
Absolutely.
A question for Ernie?
Yes, sir. Brother Suggs, very quickly, we know that Norwood is going to try to count on that Buckhead bounce. She's the only major candidate who says race isn't a factor. Which of these black candidates would be the best candidate to deal with Norwood, particularly since there seems to be some political jockeying? You got Kasim them lining up with Lance Bottoms, but Vince Ford, Kwanzaa Hall, there's a political split, there's an infighting. Which of these black candidates in the runoff will be the hardest for Norwood to beat?
All right, so Ernie, I know we lost you right there real quick there, but Greg,
what do you think?
Ernie, Greg was asking the question in terms of Greg was asking the question. Ernie, can you hear me?
I heard this question.
Okay, go ahead.
Question, but I don't know if we know the answer to that. Kasim Reed, who is he does very well in polling. He's backing Keisha Lance Bottoms. Right. Caesar Mitchell, City Council President. Kwanzaa Hall represents a gentrified area of town that has a lot of white voters in it. So either of those three could poll. Vincent, who's a state senator who has Bernie Sanders' support. Each of these candidates could be a formidable challenge to Mary Norwood. It's just going to be a matter of which one of them gets in there.
Real quick, Ernie, last question for you. Who, based upon your reporting, who has the stronger ground game? You can get endorsements, you can have money. We saw what happened with Randall Woodfin in Birmingham. He had a strong ground game, and that's how he blew away incumbent William Bell in the runoff. Based upon what you've seen, who has the strongest ground game?
All the candidates, Mary Norwood, but without a doubt. She is everywhere. She's at every meeting. She's at every community gathering, large or small. So she's out there. People know her. Black community knows her. In terms of the candidates who are following her, I would say Keisha or Caesar. You really do have 8 or 9 candidates who could be mayor. In January, if either of these 9 candidates are mayor, you wouldn't necessarily be at a loss in the city of Atlanta. So,
got it. All right, Ernie.
The person to beat right now.
All right, Ernie Suggs, we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no. That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.